Some time ago, I made a video about how I felt about Noct's elemental power being brute force. I said it was dumb, how it was nothing special and probably one of the least interesting powers from the Forbidden Five. I also mentioned how the rest of the Forbidden Five's powers that we knew of at the time sounded way cooler compared to brute force. And now that we know all elemental powers, I still think so. Decay, Misfortune, and Swarm all sound really devastating, then brute force just sounds lame. I also mentioned how the only way they could make brute force work as an elemental power was if they did something interesting to distinguish it from other powers that are just strength. They didn't. It was exactly what I thought it would be, just the power of punching really hard. Because we've never seen other characters who punch really hard, nope, this is definitely a first. The only difference between Noct's punches and any other character's punches is the fact that his hands glow when he punches, that's it. What I didn't expect, however, was that the Forbidden Five overall really just underutilized their elemental powers. Kerr and Sark both used their elemental powers like twice. Drix was definitely the one who used his powers the most, but for the life of me I could not tell you what Rock's elemental power even is. I don't even think she used her power once in all 10 episodes. I just find it really weird that they've been hyping up these Forbidden Five as the most dangerous elemental masters in all 16 realms just for them to not really use their elemental powers all that much. They mainly used Shatter Spin as their primary fighting technique, and the ninja have Rising Dragon technique now, which completely counters Shatter Spin, so even that doesn't feel like a threat. There's just no difference between a fight against any member of the Forbidden Five and any other character who uses Shatter Spin. During all the fights the ninja had with the Forbidden Five, you could replace them with Cinder, and the fight would play out pretty much the same way. In fact, I think Cinder put up a better fight than some of these guys because he actually used his elemental power. I never felt like the Forbidden Five were a bigger threat to the ninja than any other past villains. They were just kind of there for a while and then they died. But it still feels really underwhelming that all they did for this first half of the season was spend all their time collecting blades to free a beast that just killed them, and not really cause that much destruction. The whole plot of Season 2 revolves around not letting Ross free the Forbidden Five. We can't let Ross free the Forbidden Five, guys. If the Forbidden Five are freed, unspeakable things will happen. Well, now they're free and they didn't really do all that much. We had one character whose only power is punching, with the only difference being that his hands glow. Another character who never used her elemental power, so even if her power was something devastating, she's too dumb to use it. Then there was the infamous Sark fight. At first when he was fighting Lloyd, I was like, okay, I understand that green is supposed to be the most powerful element, so I understand that Lloyd by himself can probably take on one of the Forbidden Five, but then Pixel shows up and she just beats the crap out of Sark too. This guy was defeated by a regular-ass powerless Nindroid, and I'm supposed to be afraid of these guys? I don't dislike the Forbidden Five overall. I don't think they're bad characters, but the elemental power side of them is really underwhelming, because they either barely use their elemental powers or straight up never use them. I know that they will probably come back, but still, for what's supposed to be the first half of a whole season about the Forbidden Five, overall it's just really underwhelming. Drix was the only one who was constantly using and taking advantage of his powers, while the rest only ever attacked with Shatter Spin, making them basically no different from any other character who uses Shatter Spin. Most of them didn't even explain what their power was, and didn't even name their powers. So if I'm just a casual watcher, I wouldn't even understand what most of their powers are supposed to be. Every time they were fighting the ninja, I just kept thinking, wow, they could probably benefit from using their elemental powers, you know? The one thing that we were told made them so dangerous? It surely isn't Shatter Spin the only thing that makes them dangerous, because we know that other people can do that too. Kerr could have probably straight up killed all the ninja if she only thought of using her elemental power, but no, she chooses to use Shatter Spin. I don't even know what effect Sark's power could have had on the ninja, because he only ever used his power once to break down a card, and then got overpowered every time he tried to use his powers again. Then there's Noct, who doesn't even pose a threat because I think even Shatter Spin is stronger than his lame power of brute force. And of course Rox never does shit. Why are these villains so weak? They were hyped up to be so dangerous that they had to be imprisoned in another plane of existence that could only be opened once every millennia. But now they're here and they're a mild inconvenience at best. Their only purpose was to release the real threat for this season, which is Thunderfang. Which leads me to ask, if not for Thunderfang, what were they even planning on doing? Why are they looking to free Thunderfang now but not before they were imprisoned? What's changed? Why do they need extra power now? Is it because clearly they're not as powerful as they were made out to be? And if that's the case and they need Thunderfang's power, and Thunderfang could outpower the Forbidden Five so easily, then why wasn't Thunderfang the one imprisoned in Nether Space? He's been proving to be a far greater threat than any of the Forbidden Five. Thunderfang killed the Green Ninja. What have the Forbidden Five done? Break down a car? Why were they the ones imprisoned in another plane of existence, while Thunderfang, who is the real threat, is just underground, restrained by chains that can be cut by blades that can be accessed at any time? I was far more intimidated by Thunderfang than I ever was by any of the Forbidden Five, because Thunderfang actually looks and acts like he's a real threat that even the Source Dragons themselves fear. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge the leaks for the second half of the season. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I won't go into anything specific, but I do want to acknowledge how much better of a threat the Forbidden Five are in Part 2. It actually feels intimidating whenever they show up on screen. However, the elemental power aspect of them has been completely abandoned at this point. And even their new abilities are thanks to Thunderfang. So I still struggle to understand what the Forbidden Five were planning to do if not for him. But regardless, yes, the Forbidden Five are a far better threat in Part 2. But the elemental power aspect of them has been completely abandoned. In conclusion, the Forbidden Five were a disappointment in Part 1, but they're far better in Part 2, but their elemental powers were never explored, and the real threat all along has always been Thunderfang.